As we're talking more about the media coverage with women's collegiate basketball, I'm going to ask some people in my dorm questions and thoughts about the game itself. When you think of women's college basketball, what is the first player that comes to mind?
Caitlin Clark.
Caitlin Clark.
Caitlin Clark.
Caitlin Clark.
Do you think that player is changing the game of basketball and even for other sports, and how?
I think that absolutely Caitlin Clark she's changing the face of women's basketball because, I think that I saw a statistic where it was like the championship game for women's college basketball was like viewed more than every single World Series game combined, like for the last year. It was something crazy like that, and it's just awesome to see like sports get picked up in popularity that haven't really had that in the past, and I think that she's played a very vital part in that.
I think she's definitely changing the game of basketball. Some of the tournament games that she was in were the most watched women's sports games in history. So I think definitely it's bringing a lot of attention to women's sports.
Yeah, I think that especially Caitlin Clark, she's showcasing that these women can really play at such a high level, that they're putting in the work just as much as men, and they're getting the views, and like it's paying off in the media.
I think her gaining popularity in women's basketball, and she is also like gaining popularity for women's sports in general, and she's representing women's sports as a whole.
What factors do you think have contributed to the increased popularity of women's basketball this year?
I think there's been a lot of star power in the college NCAA women's basketball. I think there's a lot of stars, and a lot of people have followed the tournament this year. So yeah.
I think the media and also just a lot of the players, like Caitlin Clark, Angel Reese, you hear them all the time. And the media, people are just starting to see on Instagram that they're really good and that they can also play at a really high level.
I think that primarily having a face of the league is really important. Like for the NBA, you have LeBron James for a while, and now it's turning over. But for women's basketball, I feel like we never really had that, and with players like Caitlin Clark and Angel Reese, there's a lot of opportunities for new players to watch because they actually know someone who's playing, which was, I feel like, one of the main problems in the WNBA before that.
Are there any big differences between men's and women's college basketball that you seem to find interesting?
I used to think that like men's was a lot more interesting to watch just because they were so much more physical, but when I watched the last like championship game, I noticed that like women's, it was a really physical game, and there was just a lot of like contact, and it's not really that different anymore.
No, I think both games are both equally interesting to watch.
I don't think that there are a lot of differences when comparing the actual gameplay of the two. I think that the main differences were between the amount of people who are watching it and the fan bases, but I think that started to decrease because of the popularity that it's gotten over the past couple of years, and I think that it's an awesome thing that they're starting to be comparable between numbers and viewership and stuff.
I find the nets interesting. I'm a volleyball player, and in men and women's volleyball, the height difference is very different on the nets, and I think if the women's nets were lower, we could see a lot of women dunking the basketball, and that could be pretty cool to see. Maybe that's a hot take, but I've always thought that way since playing volleyball.